So today I continued on working on the Duloc dancers' tunics, or mainly the top part of them, and I managed to complete them today as I had four and a half left over from yesterday. Something that I struggled with a bit today, that I did as well yesterday, was that when I was sewing on the white square of fabric onto the middle of the tunic, I'd often get the back of the fabric caught in my machine, so I'd sew through two layers when I only wanted to sew through one, and then like the top of the fabric would be attached to the bottom, so there'd be like a little bag, a massive um, flap of fabric where it wasn't supposed to be, and then I'd have to go back and unpick this. This can happen with pretty much anything you're sewing, but it was particularly difficult and happened quite a lot with these tunics because I was having to sew through the head holes and the armholes. Um, so there wasn't a lot of room to maneuver what I had, and it would get bunched up quite easily and layered, which made it quite difficult. So by the last few, I got to checking with my hand every time before I started sewing, and as I was going, that there was just one layer of fabric there and that I wasn't getting anything caught, as it's really inconvenient and slows you down when you do keep on catching that fabric and having to stop, unpick it and resew, and then you've done it again, so you have to stop, unpick it and resew. So doing that is really quite time consuming. So it was good when I'd managed to make it happen less. I also, once I'd finished sewing the top part of all of the tunics, all the embellishments, I pressed the side seams of the tunics, which had been constructed by someone else earlier. I was just pressing them flat as they were quite curved outwards, quite standing out, and you want them to be flat and pressed nice and neatly. After that, I moved on to sewing some elastic onto two bows, one for one of the three little pigs and one for Pinocchio. The three little pigs ones went fairly simply. I did the same as what I did for the mouse bow ties, where I just started off by sewing the elastic together on the machine and then hand sewing it to the bow. I did the same for Pinocchio. However, initially when I sewed it on, I sewed the elastic into the middle of the bow, and because the bow was quite heavy, quite full and large, it tipped over when it would sit. So rather than sitting straight upwards and visible, it would tip over, so you could only really see the edge. So I unpicked this and moved the elastic to the top so it wouldn't flop over, and this held a lot better, and the entirety of the bow was visible. I then made an adjustment to the Mad Hatter's trousers as they were too long. I just sewed a new hem along the bottom of the trousers so they were shorter, so they fit the act better. And I also had the same problem as I did with the tunics with that, is some of the fabric got caught and I had to stop and unpick it, which was quite annoying. But it was for the same reason as with the tunics, was because there wasn't a lot of space to put it in the machine, so everything was quite it got wrinkled quite easily as there was so much fabric to contend with. After I had done that, I worked on making three pigtails for the little pigs. I did this by getting three pipe cleaners, holding them together and twisting them till it made like one massive pipe cleaner. And because there's a wire inside them, they've got quite a lot of structure, which means I could twist them into pigtail shape. But before I did that, I cut out a strip of fabric about a ruler's width on the bias of the fabric, so it was stretchy. And I cut this out, and then I folded it in half, and I sewed it in the machine to create a tube. To make sure I had the right size that fit the pipe cleaners exactly, before I sewed it up, I checked with the pipe cleaner and marked out on my fabric how far over the side I wanted it to be. And then I sewed it down the sides. I turned it was, the way I sewed it was inside out, and then I flipped it the other way around, so it was no longer inside out, and the seam was on the inside and not visible, so it was tidy. And then I sewed along the top of the tube at an angle, so it was pointy like the tip of the tail would be. And I inserted the pipe cleaners, and then I twisted it into the curly shape. And later I will attach this to the pig's dungarees when we've tried it on the actors, so we can find the right placement for the tails. Something that I think I could have done better today was using a better thread colour on the Mad Hatter's trousers, because I used a light blue when the trousers were quite like a light green, but it was also darker than I thought it was. I had quite a lot of trouble trying to find a thread that matched the colour, as I got a lot of greens, and then when I actually put them next to the trousers, I found that they were all very contrasting when I thought away from the trousers that they looked quite similar. It was quite a tricky green, quite a tricky colour to match. So I'd gone with a light blue, but I think I might have switched for a different green, as that might have been closer than the one that I used. Um, I also would have sewn the pigtail tip a little bit neater, but maybe not even the sewing being neater, but how I cut it and arranged it to be sewn first, as it was quite lumpy. There was quite a lot of fabric that I stuffed down to fold over, so the raw edge wasn't showing as like a little hem. But because of that, it came out quite lumpy and uneven. So I think if I did this again, I'd cut it out a bit better, cut the tip of the tail out a bit better, so there wasn't so much bulk. What went well today though was the tube that I made for the pig's tails actually fit very well. It's very snug in the right way. Partly I think this is because pipe cleaners are quite forgiving, as the fluff can obviously be compressed, but it also fills the space quite a bit. I was a bit worried, as when I did piping I had a lot of trouble getting it to fit the size of the piping, but I didn't have that at all this time. I managed to get it first time. I think this was partly because I didn't have the pipe cleaners inside of it. I measured it out, and I checked on the side of my machine where they have measurements, that it was at 1.5. So I made sure to make sure I kept the edge of the fabric at 1.5, and I think that kept it nice and consistent and neat.